Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
What was the worst war in history to live through as an average soldier?
Probably World War I. Nobody knows what they're doing because it's a war of transitioning technology and tactics. Experimental chemical weapons are deployed regularly and result in agonizing injury and death. First time in history mass artillery has ever been deployed. No frame of reference for the giant explosions that are raining down from nowhere. Most of the war is spent in a ditch where no gains are made until all your friends are slowly picked off by sniper fire and artillery shells. You don't even know what you're fighting for. There is no clear enemy or ideology. You're just a pawn being pushed around on a map being redrawn by old men completely divorced from the horror they're inflicting on you.
Nah, ancient wars were way worse. Fight in World War I. Quick deaths from bullets or shrapnel. Self-end or mercy killing is usually possible. Prisoners of wars are treated somewhat humanely. Decent chance of going home to family. Healthcare exists. Versus. Fight in some tribal or imperial conflict in 500 BC. Slow and painful deaths. Could take weeks for infections to kill. No healthcare. Brutally tortured, assaulted, maybe enslaved if captured. Seriously look up ancient torture methods. Low chance of ever returning home. Disease man, often killed more than the enemy.
Key difference is that ancient warfare was usually fairly low casualty, often planned to acute details like the weather sucks today. We shall fight tomorrow, and the degree of violence was usually fairly limited. Also, slavery was the driver of economy, just like your soldiers were also farmers without whom you will all starve, hence greater interest in keeping both your own and the enemy alive. Then also very different morals and how people see religion played a grand role. Warfare of antiquity is generally over-memed. With that being said, there were obviously still some absolutely nightmarish battles and wars. People often discount that before firearms, warfare was still largely individual effort, especially for less organized groups. There was no industrial killing like today. If you want to murder the other guy, you will be the one stabbing him up. You will feel his blood, guts, piss and feces on you, and you will get to look him in the eye face to face during the whole thing too. It is not so easy or clean to BTFO a person with a cold weapon. Men often made war for reasons that would be very alien and plainly nonsensical to us. Warfare of old was often a deeply spiritual, religious venture. Not religious war, mind you, but war itself was understood as one of a way how to achieve spiritual gains otherwise limited to wise men, priests, and such. Romans especially were very different in this than how people see them today. Every war was a holy war for them, part of religious, even metaphysical. Shitload of pretty much forgotten aspects we completely ignore today. Very different from industrial-scale slaughter of World War I and World War II or today.
You shouldn't have left one important detail in your already great post. They often did ritual slaughter before the battle, asking the gods for signs and other stuff. And they would postpone the battle if the priest said no. It's hilarious how superstitious people were back then.
Punic Wars, battle for Kenny. The Romans were henceforth enclosed in a pocket with no means of escape. The Carthaginians created a wall and began to systematically massacre them. Polybius wrote, as their outer ranks were continually cut down, and the survivors forced to pull back and huddle together, they were finally all killed where they stood. As Livy described, so many thousands of Romans were dying. Some, whose wounds, pinched by the morning cold, had roused, as they were rising up, covered with blood, from the midst of the heaps of slain, were overpowered by the enemy. Some were found with their heads plunged into the earth, which they had excavated, having thus, as it appeared, made pits for themselves, and having suffocated themselves. Nearly 600 legionaries were slaughtered each minute until darkness brought an end to the bloodletting.
That reminds me, my great-grandfather lived through some Daugentier life. Great-grandfather was a Czechoslovakian legionnaire in Russia when he was very young. Returned home nearly a decade after the conflict ended to his wife, who faithfully waited for him, and now nearly adult children. Always said that he'd spent majority of time there captured. Never really wanted to talk about his experience there. And as we all know, legionnaires went through major warfare. Everyone always assumed he'd seen or did some horrible stuff. Only on his deathbed he actually retells the story to his son, my grandfather. It went like this. Traveling across whole Russia, trying to get back home. Stuck in nowhere Siberia with his bros. They are trying to reach a railway station which should be somewhere around. Weather gets terrible, he gets lost in a snowstorm, all alone. Nearly dies from exposure. Barely makes it to some village, just few houses near frozen lake. Nothing more. Knocks on a first door, some babushka opens it. He explains everything. She calls some local woman who can tend to frostbite. She arrives, pumps him full of vodka and starts tending to his wounds. It takes few weeks until he is all right again. Finds out the village is quite literally just women, since all men went to war or died out from old age. Lady who cares for him is this middle-aged woman who explains him they would really appreciate him helping around, since the life there is hard there and they need a man around. He has nothing better to do, all his bros are gone and the enemy won't find him there neither. So he agrees. They get to know each other better. He strategically forgets to mention the fact he has wife and kids home. She is still a good-looking woman. He is a young guy full of strength. Of course, they start having relations very soon. This lady is somewhat of a central figure in the village. She knows it wouldn't work like that. So she decides not to be greedy. A few weeks later, she tells him he needs to help other women too and takes him to the nearest house. So he goes, he repairs her roof, brings a lot of firewood, fixes the well, cleans up the chimney, etc. She repays him with food, drink, and of course sex. He sticks around for a week or two. Then she sends him to another neighbor, where the similar process repeats. During the day he works on women's houses, helps with hardest work, fixes things. Nights are spent in embrace of rather thirsty ladies, some of whom had been without man for years. Years pass like this, the war ends, he still sticks around there. He described it as paradise on God's earth. At this point, most of the women in the village are with his child. One day the conscience finally catches up with him. Not knowing what is with his wife and family back home is crushing him. He admits that to the main lady. She reluctantly agrees to help him to get back to civilization. Spends nearly 2 weeks walking to the nearest train station. In a few months of time he is back home, tells everyone he was a prisoner of war the whole time. It's not unusual, most spent years getting back, some arrived even later. Many never returned at all. Gets war heroes welcome and cushy position in new Czechoslovak army. Later, when he was retelling the whole story to my grandfather, who then told it to my dad, who gave the story to me. He repeatedly said that those years in Russia were by far the happiest of his life. And considering these memories were possibly the last thing on his mind when he left this world, I would say he wasn't lying either.
I don't know, but ancient wars had no social stigma about torturing prisoners for amusement, enslaving/kill your family, killing you, enslaving you, and genocide was done as a matter of course if taking slaves wasn't worthwhile. Supply lines were trash and starvation could wipe out armies on the move. No heat, but you have to be out in the winter. No AC. No medicine. Poor diet. Crap yourself because latrines are near the water source. Fear if you lose because your infant son is definitely getting smashed against the nearest rock before they kill your wife. Only warfare that might be more brutal is pre-civilization because it's more common and there is a decent amount of cannibalism. Ancient tribes had homicide rates well above Europe from 1914 to 1945. Like 15 to 33% of men who make it to adulthood will die in violent competition. Single-day battlefield deaths also used to be significantly higher. For all the advances in firepower, deaths are actually down, and deaths as a percentage of the population have gone down dramatically. Just the 30 Years' War killed a greater percentage of Europe than both world wars, by a significant margin, and that was surrounded by other major wars.
Be father in the mid-1990s. Work for state police. Get assigned to go undercover in a branch of some regional militia. About a dozen full members. Fool around in Nowads for a few months. Finally hear some guy cooking up a plan to bomb a judge. Half the militia is on board with it. Dad is a bit shocked, as most of them seemed normal enough. A couple guys leave the group. Plot keeps advancing. State police decide they have enough evidence for a case. Plan to arrest everyone at the meeting after next. Dad is at the meeting 1 week before the scheduled raid. Suddenly, doors get kicked in. Everybody gets arrested. State police confused. Dad later finds out that the guy who started the plot was a TF. Club president was FBI. 2 sheriff's deputies in the rank and file. U.S. Marshals involved somehow. The whole militia branch was founded as an FBI honeypot. Dad's face when the whole thing gets buried out of embarrassment. Have you guys ever been banned from your local gun range? I have, and I don't know what to do. Basically, I have been going to it for about 6 years now, but I never really speak to anyone. Almost nobody knows my name, etc. I just go to shoot when I need to unwind. I probably spend 10 hours a week at the range in total, and it is a major part of my existence. I was banned because of a joke I made. Essentially, a cute girl was in the range, and when finished, I tried to talk to her.
I had trouble hitting the target.
I did as well.
I saw you. No, you didn't.
No, you are my target. The joke is a flirty one and saying that I wanted to be her boyfriend. And she is my life target, but she took it as a threat and reported me to management. They told me they didn't believe my story, and when combined with previous issues I have had, apparently. After some shootings I was a lot smilier and came in twice as much as normal, that they were banning me. Be like 11 years old. In Nawds with Dad's .22 revolver. Setting up sticks in the creek bed mud and shooting enemy soldiers. Some guy comes down the path.
Hey kid, I bet you can't hit this kin 6 times in a row.
Set it up, mister. I got this. He sticks the kin in the mud. Shoot it 6 times. Look at guy expecting approval. Guy looks expressionless. Mutters.
I got you now.
Reaches for me, touches my shoulder. I jerk the trigger and discharge another round. Guy immediately turns around and quickly walks away. Wonder if I did something wrong, like did I break a rule? Why was he so weird? Go home, eat dinner. I figured it out later. I thank Murder Cube that Dad's revolver holds 10 shots.
I was thinking more about this today. I was originally in the World War I team in this discussion, but upon thinking about it more, I think being a part of the American Civil War would also be a pretty hellish experience. Especially if you were Southern. Literally can't escape the conflict because your neighbors are potential combatants. Still fighting with basically firing squads, dudes lined up to shoot at each other and watch each other drop dead before running in to gore one another with bayonets. Sometimes cannons would blast through the line and completely blow dudes apart. Terminal performance of the bullets of the day were so nasty and medical technology so poor that even if you survived being shot, you'd more than likely have to allow a doctor saw off one of your limbs with no anesthetic in order to avoid dying from infection. For the Southerners, you're ultimately fighting over the right to own a person as property, which you almost certainly are not rich enough to do even if you wanted to. For the Southerners, no matter how hard you fight, you're still doomed to lose because you are cut off from trade with the rest of the world. Your own economy is shit. And there isn't enough food or guns or shoes for everybody.
I'd say the water wars of 2042. Recruiters told me I'd get a free place if I took a short trip north with the force to sharpen my teeth in the water wars. It's either that or starve. Where do I sign up? I've heard the stories of Canadians killing refugees, even launching bombs on American farmers. After centuries, we kept them safe from invaders. When push came to shove, they tried to choke up all the water. I'm here in Lansing with the Army Division sponsored by the Infrastructure Corps down at Amazon. If I make it out alive, we'll have a home on a lake. If die, what's the difference? I'm dead anyway. I'm a gunner. But I'd rather be a gunner than a goner. Bombed out ruins of Flint in my rear view. Bombed out ruins of a half-dead man. Had to stop smoking meth so they'd give me a gun. A small price to pay. I don't want to starve on my own. When we hit the border, we didn't see any troops. All I saw was Mounties patrolling refugee camps. They didn't even point their guns at us. We are outnumbered. Then I heard the machine gunners gunning. Was it the one at target practice? Most of the dead were Americans fleeing what had become of us. The sergeant said that's what they get for running. It felt messed up going through their belongings. But I got a solar-powered phone full of old songs and a speaker to blast for the folks in my pod. On the way to London, Ontario, we found a farming village and they told us to take what we needed, which was everything, and shoot what we didn't, which was everything else.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.